Mongolia, once the heart of the largest land empire in human history, led by the mighty Genghis Khan, is today one of the most sparsely populated countries on Earth. Imagine driving for hundreds of kilometers across open landscapes without encountering a single person, village, or town. Nearly 99.7% of the country appears empty, with a vast majority of its population living in just a small fraction of the land. But why is this the case? Is it because of the harsh climate, the barren geography, or something buried deep in its turbulent history? Could it be that Buddhism, widely known as a religion of peace, played an unexpected role in shaping Mongolia's population? In this video, we'll explore the geography, climate, historical events, cultural shifts, and political forces that have all contributed to Mongolia's unique demographic reality. Let's begin the journey into the land of eternal blue sky and find out why it's so incredibly empty. Geography of Mongolia. Mongolia is a country of vast contrasts and striking natural beauty, occupying a unique position both geographically and culturally. With an area of about 1.66 million square kilometers, it is the 18th largest country in the world, yet it has one of the lowest population densities on Earth. Home to only around 3.5 million people, the country's immensity feels almost empty, with endless horizons and landscapes that remain largely untouched by human development, size, and population. The enormous territory means that Mongolia's landscapes vary greatly, from icy mountains to scorching deserts. Despite its size, the small population results in huge stretches of land without towns or settlements, giving Mongolia its reputation as a land of open skies and boundless steppes. Roughly half of the population is concentrated in the capital, Ulaanbaatar, while the rest is spread thinly across rural areas, often living traditional nomadic lifestyles. Geographical divisions. Mongolia can be divided into distinct natural regions, each with extreme climates and unique characteristics. West and Southwest, the Altai Mountains. The towering Altai Mountains dominate the west and southwest. These ranges are harsh and inhospitable, with brutal winters that can plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The rugged terrain and unforgiving climate make permanent human settlement extremely difficult. However, the area is known for its dramatic beauty, glaciers, and ancient petroglyphs carved into the rocks. North, the Sayan Mountains and Lake Kovsgul. To the north, Mongolia shares borders with Siberia, and the landscapes reflect this closeness. The Sayan Mountains and the pristine Lake Kovsgul, often called the younger sister of Lake Baikal, form one of the most stunning natural areas of the country. Dense forests dominate this region, and winters are long and severe, with heavy snow and extremely low temperatures. Despite the cold, this region is rich in biodiversity and is culturally significant for reindeer herders and nomadic tribes. South, the Gobi Desert. In stark contrast, the south of Mongolia is defined by the Gobi Desert, one of the harshest and most iconic deserts in the world. The Gobi is famous for its temperature extremes. Summer can soar to plus 45 degrees Celsius, while winter drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The soil is dry and rocky rather than sandy, making it different from many people's image of a desert. It is also historically significant, as many dinosaur fossils have been unearthed here. Despite its barren appearance, the Gobi supports resilient forms of life and nomadic herders who move with their livestock in search of scarce water and vegetation. Central and east, the steppe grasslands. The heart of Mongolia lies in its vast steppe grasslands, stretching endlessly across the central and eastern regions. This is the most livable and populated area of the country, providing fertile pastures that support Mongolia's traditional nomadic herding culture. Horses, sheep, goats, yak, here, and the steppe remains one of the last places on Earth where a true nomadic lifestyle continues to be practiced widely. Capital, Ulaanbaatar. At the center of these contrasting regions lies the capital, Ulaanbaatar, situated in the steppe valleys. The city is home to around 50% of Mongolia's population, making it the cultural, political, and economic heart of the nation. Surrounded by mountains, Ulaanbaatar experiences extreme seasons, sweltering summers, and some of the coldest winters of any capital city in the world. Harsh climate conditions in Mongolia. Mongolia is a country marked by some of the most extreme and unforgiving climate conditions on Earth. The nation's geography already imposes significant challenges, but it is the climate that truly defines daily life, economic activity, and settlement patterns. These harsh conditions have shaped the lifestyle of its people for centuries and continue to act as a major barrier to modernization and development. Freezing cold in the north and west. In the northern and western regions, winter temperatures frequently plummet to extreme lows, often reaching -40 degrees Celsius or lower. These areas, dominated by the Altai and Sayan mountains, are covered in snow for long stretches of the year. The intensity of the cold makes large-scale human settlement difficult, with only small, scattered communities managing to survive in such an environment. Traditional nomadic lifestyles, involving herding and seasonal migration, remain the most practical way of life here, since the cold renders modern infrastructure projects costly and unsustainable. Scorching summers in the south. The southern part of the country, where the vast Gobi Desert dominates, faces the opposite extreme. Summers bring scorching heat that can soar to +45 degrees Celsius, creating a stark contrast to the bitter cold of the north. The Gobi is not only hot, but also prone to strong winds and sandstorms, which erode the soil and make agriculture virtually impossible. This combination of heat and dryness further discourages population growth, leaving the desert largely uninhabited except for a few nomadic herders and isolated mining operations. Very low rainfall. Another defining characteristic of Mongolia's climate is its exceptionally low annual rainfall. Much of the country receives less than 200 to 300 millimeters of precipitation per year, with some desert zones getting even less. The lack of water severely limits farming potential, restricting agricultural activity, mainly to livestock herding. Crops can only be cultivated in select valleys or irrigated areas, and even then, unpredictable droughts and severe weather often destroy harvests. This water scarcity is one of the main reasons why Mongolia has one of the lowest population densities in the world. Barrier to infrastructure and development. The combination of extreme cold, blistering heat, and scarce rainfall makes it extremely challenging to build and maintain infrastructure. Roads crack under cycles of freezing and thawing. Desert winds bury tracks in sand, and remote regions remain cut off for much of the year. These conditions also make urbanization difficult, explaining why nearly half of Mongolia's population lives in the capital, Ulaanbaatar, where resources and services are concentrated. Outside the capital and a handful of towns, modern infrastructure such as railways, paved highways, and reliable electricity grids are sparse. Nomadic lifestyle and livestock economy in Mongolia. For thousands of years, Mongolia has been shaped by the resilience of its nomadic people. The vast open steppes, deserts, and mountain ranges made farming nearly impossible in most regions, so survival depended on herding animals. This tradition created not only a unique way of life, but also an economy that revolves around livestock as its backbone. Horses, camels, goats, sheep, and yaks are more than just animals to Mongolians. They represent wealth, food, clothing, and mobility. Herding allowed families to adapt to the harsh climate and make use of the land's scarce resources, developing a culture deeply connected to nature. The essence of nomadism lies in movement. Families migrate several times a year in search of fresh pastures and water for their animals. These seasonal migrations follow rhythms that have been passed down through generations, guided by the knowledge of where grass grows best during different times of the year. Unlike permanent settlements, this mobility ensures survival in an environment marked by extreme winters, scorching summers, and limited rainfall. The nomad's ability to adjust constantly to their surroundings demonstrates a remarkable harmony between human life and the natural world. Even today, in the 21st century, this ancient tradition continues to thrive. Around 30% of Mongolians still live as nomads, dwelling in the iconic jirs, portable, round tents made of felt and wood. These jirs are perfectly adapted to the environment, easy to dismantle, transport, and reassemble, providing warmth in the freezing winters and ventilation during the hot summers. Life inside a jiryar is simple but rich in cultural symbolism, with every detail from its structure to its orientation carrying meaning tied to family and tradition. Economically, livestock remains a central pillar of Mongolia's identity. Dairy products such as fermented mare's milk, erag, cheese, and butter are staples of the diet, while wool, cashmere, and leather provide clothing and goods for trade. Mongolia is one of the world's largest producers of cashmere, sourced from goats raised in the cold steppes. Herding is not only a matter of sustenance, but also a cultural heritage, reinforcing social bonds and rituals tied to animals. Festivals like Nadam celebrate horse racing, wrestling, and archery, sports born from the nomadic lifestyle. In a rapidly modernizing world, the persistence of Mongolia's nomadic culture is extraordinary. While urbanization and economic change are pulling many towards cities such as Ulaanbaatar, nomadism remains a living link to the nation's past. It embodies resilience, adaptability, and a deep respect for the land. The livestock economy continues to define Mongolia's identity, serving as a reminder that survival in such harsh conditions is possible not by conquering nature, but by moving in rhythm with it. Mongolia's history. Understanding present-day Mongolia requires looking back at its remarkable past, marked by conquests, wars, and political transformations that shaped not only Asia, but the entire world. The Mongol Empire in the 13th century. In the 13th century, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, Mongolia gave birth to the largest continuous land empire in history, the Mongol Empire. In just a few decades, scattered nomadic tribes were united under his rule, forming an extremely efficient military and administrative system. The empire stretched from East Asia to Eastern Europe, covering vast regions of China, Persia, Russia, and parts of the Middle East. Expansion, wars, and human losses. This expansion, however, came at an enormous cost. Although victorious in countless battles, the Mongols lost a significant portion of their male population in constant wars against powerful empires and states. Since Mongolia already had a relatively small population, these conflicts made the demographic problem even worse. The human toll of warfare drastically reduced the empire's ability to repopulate the vast areas it had conquered. Division after Genghis Khan's death. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the empire was divided among his descendants, fragmenting into separate khanates. This internal division weakened central unity, even though each part retained significant military and cultural power. The following period was marked by rivalries among dynasties and a gradual decline in centralized authority. The legacy of Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty. Among Genghis Khan's successors, his grandson Kublai Khan stood out. He managed to conquer all of China and, in 1271, founded the Yuan dynasty, establishing his capital in Beijing. This achievement solidified Mongol rule over one of the world's greatest civilizations, creating a bridge between the nomadic culture of the steppe and the highly developed societies of East Asia. Influence of Buddhism in Mongolia. In 1578, a decisive turning point occurred in Mongolian history when Altan Khan, one of the most influential Mongol leaders of the post-imperial era, officially adopted Tibetan Buddhism as the state religion. This was not merely a personal act of devotion, but a strategic move that reshaped the cultural and spiritual foundations of Mongolia. By embracing Buddhism, Altan Khan strengthened ties with Tibet and its influential lamas, which provided the Mongols with a unifying ideology after centuries of political fragmentation following the collapse of the Mongol Empire. The adoption of Buddhism marked a dramatic transformation in Mongolian society. Traditionally, the Mongols had been a warrior people, defined by their nomadic lifestyle, military discipline, and the legacy of conquest left by Genghis Khan and his successors. However, with Buddhism becoming central to Mongolian identity, the cultural focus shifted from warfare and expansion to spirituality, meditation, and peaceful living. Monasteries and temples flourished, Buddhist teachings became widespread, and lamas began to exert great influence over politics and daily life. While Buddhism brought internal stability and a sense of cultural refinement, it also made the Mongols more vulnerable to external threats. Their warrior spirit, once feared across Eurasia, was gradually replaced by a more passive orientation. This cultural shift was evident when the Qing dynasty of China sought to expand into Mongolian territories in the 18th century. Between 1755 and 1757, Qing forces launched devastating campaigns against the Mongols. Without the military ferocity that had once been their defining strength, the Mongols were unable to resist effectively. The result was catastrophic. Around 600,000 Mongols were killed during these campaigns. This massacre not only decimated the population, but also left a long-lasting scar on Mongolian society. The Qing invasion and subsequent domination of Mongolia highlight the paradoxical effects of adopting Buddhism. On one hand, it provided a cohesive spiritual identity that distinguished the Mongols from neighboring powers and preserved their culture through difficult times. On the other hand, it diminished their military power, making them less capable of defending their independence. This dual effect of Buddhism, cultural enrichment but political vulnerability, remains one of the most significant episodes in Mongolian history. Ultimately, the adoption of Buddhism profoundly shaped the trajectory of Mongolia. The dramatic population decline caused by violence, combined with the cultural shift toward a more peaceful existence, left Mongolia far less powerful than in its imperial days. Yet, despite the tragedies of the Qing campaigns, Buddhism became deeply embedded in Mongolian identity, influencing its art, traditions, and worldview for centuries to come. Chinese and Soviet control in Mongolia. For nearly 2 centuries, Mongolia remained under the shadow of Chinese rule. During the Qing dynasty, which had consolidated vast areas of Asia under its control, Mongolia was absorbed into the empire and treated largely as a frontier buffer zone rather than a fully integrated region. The Mongolian people retained their nomadic traditions, but political autonomy was virtually non-existent, and their ability to preserve national identity was constantly challenged by Chinese administration and settlement pressures. In 1921, after years of foreign domination, Mongolia declared its independence, but this step was only possible with the decisive support of the Soviet Union. The revolutionaries who sought freedom from Chinese influence aligned themselves closely with Moscow, which quickly positioned itself as both protector and overseer. This created a paradox. Mongolia was independent in name, but immediately fell into the orbit of another great power. By 1924, It had formerly become the Mongolian People's Republic, the second socialist state in the world after the USSR. Despite the symbolic value of independence, the country functioned largely as a Soviet puppet state, its policies dictated by the Kremlin. The Soviet Union exerted profound influence on Mongolia's society, culture, and religion. One of the most devastating impacts was on Buddhism, which for centuries had been the spiritual backbone of Mongolian identity. Thousands of monasteries were destroyed in waves of repression, particularly during the 1930s, and tens of thousands of monks were executed or imprisoned. The sacred architecture, manuscripts, and traditions that had once flourished across the steppes were systematically wiped out under the guise of modernizing society and eliminating superstition. This left a cultural and spiritual vacuum that reshaped the very fabric of Mongolian life. At the same time, the Soviet administration sought to mold Mongolia into a socialist satellite, useful primarily for its strategic location and natural resources. The country was exploited as a source of cheap labor and raw materials to serve Soviet needs. Agricultural collectivization, modeled after policies in the USSR, disrupted traditional nomadic practices and imposed new forms of economic dependence. Moreover, the suppression of Buddhism had long-term demographic consequences because the faith discouraged marriage for monks and emphasized asceticism. Soviet repression of the religion further destabilized family structures. Combined with poverty and harsh living conditions, this contributed to a decline in birth rates, worsening the already small population problem that Mongolia faced. The legacy of this period is deeply imprinted on Mongolia's history. While independence from China was achieved, it came at the cost of replacing one external overlord with another. The decades of Soviet control reshaped Mongolia's institutions, erased much of its cultural heritage, and created a society struggling to balance modernization with the survival of its ancient traditions. The scars of repression, cultural loss, and demographic decline remain key factors in understanding the challenges Mongolia faced throughout the 20th century. Why the population never grew. Mongolia's population remained small throughout history despite its vast territory. Several interlinked factors explain this demographic stagnation, ranging from natural conditions to cultural choices. Harsh geography and climate. Mongolia is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. With the Altai and Sayan Mountains in the west and north, the Gobi Desert in the south, and wide open steppes in the center, the land is rugged and unforgiving. Winters often reach -40 degrees Celsius, while summers in the desert can soar to +45 degrees Celsius. Rainfall is scarce, making agriculture nearly impossible outside small areas. These harsh conditions limited food production and discouraged dense settlement, forcing many to migrate or live in scattered mobile groups. Poor infrastructure. Even when modernization began in the 20th century, Mongolia struggled to build lasting infrastructure. Roads, railways, and energy systems remained limited, and many rural areas were left isolated. Without strong infrastructure, large-scale urbanization was nearly impossible, and the movement of goods, people, and resources remained slow and costly. This lack of development reinforced the nomadic way of life, rather than supporting large cities that could sustain population growth. Weak economy, dependent on the USSR. For much of the 20th century, Mongolia relied heavily on the Soviet Union. Its economy was based on livestock, mining, and Soviet aid, rather than a diversified industrial base. This dependence created vulnerability. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Mongolia's economy fell into crisis. Without strong industries or jobs in urban centers, many Mongolians continued to live in traditional rural ways, limiting incentives to have large families or settle permanently. Cultural and religious choices, religion and tradition, also played a role in population dynamics. Tibetan Buddhism, deeply rooted in Mongolian society since the 16th century, often encouraged monastic life, where men became monks and abstained from marriage. At times, entire generations saw a significant proportion of men removed from family life. Later, under Soviet influence, modern policies discouraged large families, and cultural shifts led some Mongols to avoid marriage or limit the number of children. This combination reduced natural population growth over centuries. Nomadic lifestyle and family structure. Finally, the nomadic way of life shaped demographic patterns. Herding families moved seasonally in search of pasture, living in gurs, yurts, rather than permanent houses. This mobile lifestyle made raising large families difficult. Children had to work from an early age, helping herd animals in tough conditions. The economy was based on survival rather than expansion, so population remained stable instead of rapidly growing. Unlike urban societies, where population can increase quickly due to labor specialization and services, nomadic Mongolia remained spread thin across vast grasslands. In short, Mongolia's population never grew significantly because nature was harsh, infrastructure was weak, the economy was fragile, traditions limited family expansion, and the nomadic lifestyle discouraged dense settlement. All of these combined to create a land that is huge in territory, but small in people. Mongolia today. In 2025, Mongolia remains one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world, with around 3.5 million inhabitants spread across a vast territory of over 1.6 million square kilometers. The sheer emptiness of the land makes the population density extremely low, and the sense of openness continues to define Mongolian life and culture. Unlike many countries that have rapidly urbanized, Mongolia still maintains a strong connection to its nomadic traditions. Roughly 30% of the population still lives a nomadic lifestyle, herding livestock such as horses, camels, goats, and sheep across the open grasslands. Families move seasonally in search of fresh pastures, setting up their circular tents known as jirs wherever resources are available. For these people, the rhythm of life is dictated by the land, the climate, and the health of their herds, rather than by fixed urban schedules. This ancient way of living is not seen as outdated. Instead, Mongolians consider it a source of national pride. The ability to live in harmony with vast landscapes and survive harsh winters is tied deeply to their identity. Many believe that the openness of the steppes, the freedom to roam, and the resilience of the nomadic lifestyle are what truly define what it means to be Mongolian. At the same time, modern Mongolia is also opening itself to the world. Tourism has become one of the country's fastest growing industries. Visitors are drawn by the promise of unique experiences that can only be found in Mongolia. Horseback riding across endless steppes, camel safaris in the Gobi Desert, and the chance to participate in colorful festivals such as Nadam, which celebrates the three manly sports: wrestling, horse racing, and archery. These traditions, passed down for centuries, are now part of a national effort to showcase Mongolian heritage while boosting the economy. The combination of an ancient nomadic culture and a rising tourism industry makes Mongolia a place where the past and present coexist in striking harmony. It remains a nation defined not by the size of its cities, but by the vastness of its landscapes and the resilience of its people. As Mongolia looks toward the future, it carries with it the spirit of the open steppe, where freedom, identity, and tradition remain inseparable from everyday life. Mongolia's future. When looking ahead, Mongolia's demographic and economic prospects face both limitations and opportunities. Unlike some other developing nations, rapid population growth is unlikely in the near future. The country's current population, at around 3.5 million, has been growing only slowly due to long-standing challenges. Harsh geography and extreme climate conditions, coupled with weak infrastructure and a limited industrial base, make large-scale urban expansion and demographic booms difficult to sustain. Moreover, many Mongolians still live nomadic or semi-nomadic lives, which naturally restricts the pace of modernization and urban concentration. Key challenges. Mongolia's path forward is shaped by a series of enduring obstacles. Extreme climate. Winters are brutally cold, with temperatures often dropping below -40 degrees Celsius, while summers in the Gobi Desert can soar above 40 degrees Celsius. This unpredictability and severity make agriculture unreliable and urban infrastructure costly to maintain. Poor infrastructure. Beyond the capital, Ulaanbaatar, roads, railways, and utilities are sparse. Vast distances between settlements hinder connectivity and economic integration. Weak economy. For decades, Mongolia's economy was heavily dependent on the Soviet Union. After its collapse, Mongolia struggled to diversify and build industries beyond raw resource extraction. Lack of industry. Aside from mining, there are few large-scale industries, leaving the country vulnerable to global commodity price fluctuations. These challenges explain why Mongolia struggles to attract large-scale foreign investment outside of the extractive sector, and why population growth remains stagnant. Economic opportunities. Despite these difficulties, Mongolia's future is not without promise. Two major sectors stand out as potential engines for growth. 1. Tourism. Mongolia's vast and untouched landscapes, rich history, and nomadic culture are increasingly appealing to foreign visitors. Adventure tourism, such as horseback riding across the steppes, camel safaris in the Gobi Desert, and trekking in the Altai Mountains, offers experiences unavailable elsewhere. Cultural tourism is also significant, with travelers drawn to Nadam festivals, throat singing, and Buddhist monasteries. With improved infrastructure, Mongolia could position itself as a unique global destination for ecotourism and cultural exploration. 2. Mining. Mongolia is extraordinarily rich in natural resources, especially rare earth elements, copper, zinc, and gold. Global demand for these materials, particularly for high-tech industries and green energy technologies, positions Mongolia as a strategic supplier. Projects like the Oyu-Tolgoi copper and gold mine have already drawn international attention and investment. If managed sustainably, mining revenues could provide the capital needed for infrastructure development, education, and healthcare, laying the foundation for long-term national growth.